All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Snyder from the Connect and Communicate Series Planning Committee. Thank you for joining us for this presentation, Centering Student Voices, Conducting Library Research with an Undergraduate. This discussion will be recorded and it will be made available to Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division members through the PALA website and also on the CRD blog. For this discussion, you will only need a headset or speakers. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat box at the bottom right throughout the discussion, and we'll attempt to include your questions as appropriate during the discussion or at the end. We'll also do our best to assist participants with technical issues. Please post those issues in the chat box as well. Centering Student Voices, Conducting Library Research with an Undergraduate is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division's Connect and Communicate series. I'd like to thank the CRD board for supporting the Connect and Communicate initiative and the other Connect and Communicate Planning Committee members, Erin Burns, Diane Porterfield, Ryan Sittler, Amanda Avery, Ronnalee Sioko, and Sarah Pike. And I'd also like to acknowledge PALA for allowing us to bring this discussion to you through Zoom. Thank you to Sarah for doing our closed captioning for today's session. We will be keeping track of attendance today, so please type the number of attendees at your location in the chat box if more than one of you is watching at that location. And finally, I'd like to thank and introduce our panelists for today's event, Hailley Fargo and Ally Mastrangelo. Hailley and Ally, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amy. And hello, everyone. Ally and I are really happy to be here today to talk about our project and some of the work that we've been doing together. So we'll jump into it. If I can advance the slide. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So here we are again. As Amy said, my name is Hailley Fargo. I use the pronoun she, her, hers. I am the Student Engagement Coordinator at Penn State University Libraries. I'm at the University Park campus, which is in the center of Pennsylvania. And another part of my position this year is I'm a Student Engagement Network Faculty Fellow, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. And I also am on Twitter, so if anyone else is on Twitter, you can tweet at me at Hailley Fargo.
Hi everyone, I'm Ally Mastrangelo and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm Hailley's undergraduate research assistant and I actually just graduated from Penn State last semester with degrees in labor and employment relations and psychology.
And we also want to let you know that our slides are available with the bit.ly link at the top of the slide, and that link will be available at the end as well. So we will jump into it. So before we get into the outline, what we're going to talk about today, Ally and I wanted to share our motivation for doing this particular webinar. So Ally and I have been working together since September of 2019. And so we've done a lot of research together, spent a lot of time together working on this particular project, and have had a lot of conversations about the benefits and joys of working together as a librarian and an undergraduate. So we have been talking a lot about why it's important to include undergraduate students in how we design and conduct and share research within library science. And so when we saw this opportunity to submit a proposal, we were like, yes, this is a great way to both talk about our research project, which we think is really interesting and exciting, and also to talk about what our collaboration looks like and how others might be able to replicate similar types of collaborations. So our outline for today is we'll talk a little bit about the research project that we're doing together. Ally and I will share our reasons why I wanted to hire an undergraduate research assistant and why Ally wanted to do undergraduate research. And then we'll talk a little bit about how Ally's perspective has been really helpful and informative and has shaped how the project has been going. We'll talk about what we've seen with our research, next steps, and then we'll end with some benefits and practical takeaways that hopefully many of you in the audience can use or think about if you feel motivated and inspired after our conversation. So a little bit about our project. Mapping the Student Engagement Journey is an exploratory qualitative research project. And Ally and I have talked a lot about the importance of saying exploratory. This is like round one. We're learning a lot in the process and we'll talk a little bit about that. And the goal of this project is to figure out how students at Penn State, specifically the University Park campus in this round one, are navigating the student engagement landscape, and then also how they're thinking about library resources, since this is a library research project as well. Ally and I have been keeping a blog. The link is at the bottom of that slide. So if you're interested in seeing where we've been with our research and where we will go, definitely check it out. We try to post on a semi-regular basis and kind of keep people up to date with how we're thinking about our research and how the research is evolving over time. Before we also dive a little bit deeper into the logistics of the project, we do want to kind of acknowledge our supporters and our cheerleaders for this work. So I like to say that this project is conceptually supported by the Institute for Research Design and Librarianship, IRDL. I was a member of their 6th cohort this past June at Loyola Marymount, and this project was transformed by that week in Los Angeles thinking about this project, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to kind of really think conceptually about how the research was going to work. We also want to thank the Penn State University Libraries for supporting us in this endeavor, and then also the Penn State Student Engagement Network, specifically the Faculty Academy, who have financially supported this project with money to pay for Ally and also money for the students that we interview, and so we're really happy for their support as well. Okay, so the Student Engagement Network, a little bit of context for everyone, is a unit within Penn State that was founded in 2017. Their goal is to push forward a vision and ideas around student engagement for our students, and their tagline is "Find your why, start your journey." One element of the network is supporting the Faculty Academy, which is a way for any faculty member to get some money to try out a project, to do research, to build the field around student engagement scholarship. And so I applied with this particular project in mind, got some funding, and their framework also kind of guides how the project lays out. So within the network, they talk about these buckets of student engagement experiences. So when they're talking about student engagement, they're talking about these 10 opportunity types. Now, as someone who has spent a lot of time thinking about student engagement, I know there's lots of ways to define it, but in this particular context, Ally and I are really focused on these 10 opportunities, what they look like. There are different variations that exist within these buckets, and then also thinking about, for our research, how the library may slot in or support or provide some of these opportunities. And that kind of takes us to our project scope. So this year, Ally and I are trying to interview 24 students at the University Park campus across the 12 colleges. It's an in-depth interview that lasts anywhere between 40 to 60 minutes. And one activity that we have them do at the very beginning is they map all the different types of student engagement that they've done while they've been at Penn State, based again on those 10 opportunity types. So they get to make a little map, which you see on the screen. Ally's gonna walk you through how to read this map, and there is also a bit.ly link for a blog post that Ally and I just wrote about how to read the map as well. So Ally, take it away.
Sure. So this map is from Olivia, who is actually the first student that we interviewed. She is a senior in the College of Health and Human Development at Penn State. So the way Hailley and I would read this is we would go in chronological order, so from left to right, and we would start with those rectangle stickers. So her freshman year, Olivia has a yellow sticker. So based on the key we have with the 10 student engagement types, that is a professional experience. So that may have been an internship or shadowing experience, something like that. We didn't have students include exactly what the experience was, just for the sake of confidentiality. However, when we go back and look at our transcripts, we're able to say, oh yeah, that was this internship. So then Olivia's sophomore year, she has a blue sticker, which represents an organizational experience. So a lot of students put that on their maps for joining a club. Next is a bright green sticker that is a creative accomplishment. So creative accomplishments could be performances, it could be like an art piece that they created, something of that nature. Then moving on to Olivia's junior year, we see PSU transfer. So that signals to us that Olivia's first 2 years were not at Penn State, but at a different university. So we interviewed a couple transfer students, a couple change of campus students, which has been really cool and awesome to have in our sample. So right after Olivia transferred here her junior year, we see another organizational experience followed by another professional experience. And then senior year, her last sticker is a professional experience once again. So after running through that, Hailley and I would then look at the circles. So the yellow circle indicates the point in time when a student decided on their major. So we've noticed a lot of student engagement opportunities are very related to what the student is studying. So we wanted to see when during their Penn State career or college career they figured that out. The green sticker signals the opportunity that was the most rewarding. That's really all the context we give them. They can interpret that however they want. So for Olivia, her most rewarding opportunity was the organizational experience right after she transferred here. The red sticker signifies the opportunity that was the most challenging for them. So again, we just kind of leave that open to their interpretation. So Olivia said her most recent professional experience was the most challenging for her. So the yellow, green, and red circles are on everybody's map. We made sure to ask all students about those. The blue sticker is a little bit different. That represents a leadership role, which could really be placed on any of the stickers where we discovered that the student took on a leadership role. So in Olivia's case, the organization that she found the most rewarding was also an organization where she held a leadership role, which was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, so a lot of data contained in that one map.
Yes.
And so here's a little sample of some of the maps. So something that Ally and I have talked about a lot recently is that we don't give the students a ton of direction when they make the map, as you can see by the many types of maps that are on the screen. And so for us, it's kind of fun to see how students are interpreting our instructions and also interpreting their experiences. So we've noticed that some students will put one sticker down for one organization, even though it might last several semesters or several years. And then other students, you can see that top map in the center with all those bright green stickers. That's actually the same experience. The student is just kind of marking time in a different way with how they're thinking about those stickers, which we've found very interesting.
Yeah, we've also had a couple students that will put two stickers down for the same experience because they see it as falling into two buckets, which is also pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, and so if you think about, we said that this is an exploratory study, we're really curious at how students are interpreting this, right? Because I think in institutions, we say like, these are important, and these experiences matter, but we might not quite understand how students are actually interpreting these or defining them. And what we've seen is that a lot of buckets they blend very easily.
For sure. Yeah, so this is just an example of that. So the map we just looked at, Olivia's, our very first map, that experience sophomore year is actually the same thing, even though she put down two stickers. So the organization was a dance team, and so she also put down a green sticker because she had choreographed a dance while she was a part of that team. So it was really fascinating for us to see that. Although this was an organization, Olivia saw this as both an organizational experience and a creative accomplishment sort of within that organization.
Yeah, and so as Ally and I are going back through the maps now that we've done a good chunk of our 24 interviews, starting to make some of those details to provide a little bit more explanation to other people. But yeah, we're learning a lot in this mapping process. Okay, so now that you've got a little bit of a sense of what our research project and what we've been doing look like, we're going to talk a little bit about why hire an undergraduate research assistant. So for me, there were a couple different reasons why I really wanted to have a student in this particular research project. The one thing I have been noticing in doing some reading around LIS is that sometimes when we talk about students that are the subject of our study, there seems to be this interesting distance between us as librarians and researchers and then the students themselves. And especially in some of the literature, there's also some deficit language that happens of like, the students are over there and they're lacking these skills. And so we did this research project to try to figure it out. And recently I've been having some other undergrad students read those types of articles for a class that I'm teaching and have been kind of struck at having these students read about themselves as a subject of study and kind of that disconnect between how we're thinking and talking about our research about undergraduate students. And so I was like, I really want this project to have a student perspective because I want to be really close to the student because I'm interviewing a bunch of students to learn about their experiences. I think another reason I wanted to hire an undergraduate was to see undergraduate research from the other side. So in my role as student engagement coordinator, one of my big projects is thinking about undergraduate research at Penn State and how does the library support and provide foundational level information literacy skills for students. And it's been really cool to be on that support side, but I talk to faculty or graduate students that are mentoring undergrads in this research, and I just didn't have a good frame. And so I was like, here's a research project I'm doing. I want to have a student so that I can understand what that dynamic, what that experience looks like in my own way, within my own research agenda. The other thing was thinking about some values that I talk about a lot in my job and seeing them in action. So when I talk to students, I talk about that my role is to leverage and amplify their experiences, and that involves some sort of partnership. So I really wanted to have an undergrad working with me that I could feel was my partner, and we were really in this together. Also, again, around ideas of leveraging and amplifying student experiences, expertise. I did not go to a big school for undergrad. I went to a really small college. I'm not a Penn State alum, so I don't know what that experience looks like. And so I really wanted an expert, someone who knew what that experience felt like, looked like, was like, is like, to be able to really make this project work for what we were trying to do. And then also thinking about power sharing. Again, thinking about being collaborators in this and being able to share that power equally in this particular project so that we both benefit from working together. There are also some conceptual frameworks I've been thinking about more recently, as Ally and I have kind of talked about this meta experience that we're having while we're doing this research around student engagement, because Ally's in a student engagement experience about student engagement. So thinking about ideas that come from community-based research, so collaborating with the community, in this case, undergraduates, participatory action research, again, in collaboration with communities. And then the last two are frameworks that I found more recently that have been really interesting. So the IBIS reproductive health, and this is more on the medical side, but ideas of like respect and mutual accountability, making an impact really resonated with me. And then this advanced higher education framework from Hailley and Hailley coming out of the UK, but they have these 9 values. And they're talking about partnerships with students, especially in curriculum where faculty would have students help them with coursework and things like that. But I think these ideas translate really well to research experiences like the one that we're having right now. So ideas around authenticity, honesty, reciprocity, empowerment also have really resonated with me. So those frameworks I think have also been really helpful as we kind of think about what our relationship is and how we're working together to do this research.
All right, so this is a little bit about me. This is a map that I made at the very beginning of this research experience. So when Hailley first hired me, one of the first things we did was talk about, okay, there's this idea of the maps, but how are we going to logistically do that? What are they going to look like? So this is the one I made when Hailley did a mock interview with me. And so I'm not going to go through the whole thing, so it's a little complicated, but the ones I would like to point out are the orange stickers, because those are my undergraduate research experiences. So the very first one that began my sophomore year, that is the Underrepresented Perspectives Lab in the Penn State Psychology Department. As I mentioned earlier, psychology was one of my majors as an undergrad. And so this lab looks at how minority groups view dominant groups, because a lot of times in research, the perspective is the other way around. So I really enjoyed that experience. That's definitely more quantitative skills that I've learned, but really grateful for that. I'm still working with them now a little bit, even as a graduate. And the next orange sticker during my junior year represents my honors thesis that I did with the Shire Honors College. So this was through the Department of Labor and Employment Relations, because that was my primary major. So what I did for that project was I surveyed mechanical engineering students taking a 400 level design class. And I was really interested in understanding the gender differences in their team experiences. So how women felt they were treated by teammates versus how men felt they were treated by teammates within that STEM environment. So that had some really interesting results, and I learned a lot through that. And then the last experience, the last orange sticker my senior year, is this, mapping the student engagement journey. So research has definitely been a part of my path to graduation along the way. So why get involved with undergraduate research? So I'll start out by talking just generally why it seemed like a benefit throughout my time at Penn State, and then I'll also talk about why specifically I wanted to be a part of Hailley's project. So as a psychology major, in the psychology department here, it was really emphasized that psychology is a pre-professional degree, or even if you did want a research job right out of college that didn't require a professional degree, having that lab experience is so crucial. There was a class my freshman year where the professor was like, you all should be in a lab and you've got to go on this website and you have to look. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm stressed. Like I want to go to law school, but he says I have to do it. So I have to do it. So that's how I found out about the Underrepresented Perspectives Lab, is because I went onto the psychology department website, like my professor recommended. But even outside of psychology, I think it's really beneficial for students of any major to get involved, because it gives you an opportunity to learn more about a subject that you're just genuinely interested in. So I was really interested in diversity and how we can better support people from underrepresented groups. So this lab was kind of the perfect fit for me, and I really enjoyed it. And then as for the thesis, that wasn't really optional. So, but I did have a really great time, and I was able to choose the subject as well. So again, that was a really rewarding experience. So as for this project, I was searching last summer for some part-time jobs, and I saw this. I was like, oh, this is so cool. It stood out to me right away because I care about student engagement a lot. I was a tour guide. I was a new student orientation leader. So I really want Penn State students to have that awesome 4 years like I did. And so that definitely stood out to me right away. However, I was also really interested in learning more about qualitative research. Like I mentioned earlier, my research lab in the psychology department primarily works with quantitative data. And so when I saw this, I was like, Hailley, like I'd really like to learn. So we've definitely had an emphasis on learning qualitative methods this far.
Yeah, which is a great transition to getting started.
Yes.
So Ally was hired in the fall of 2019. And so we had this conversation at the beginning where we kind of set some goals.
Mm-hmm.
So Ally came in with a lot of enthusiasm around qualitative research, which was really great because this project is all qualitative. So we mapped out some goals right from the beginning, which really helped us kind of carve the path for what was going to happen. So Ally wanted to help with the interview process. So we did some practice interviews. We ran through protocol. We changed some protocol to get ready for these interviews that we were going to conduct. And the goals then really helped inform our onboarding and our training. And so in onboarding Ally, some of it was thinking big picture about Penn State. So I had Ally read a bunch of faculty senate documentation, which was probably not the most exciting.
They were pretty long.
But a lot of good context for how the network was thinking about these 10 types, just so that she had that background context and was kind of at the same level of knowledge that I had being in the network for a couple of years. And then also some library literature as well. So thinking about how are librarians thinking about student engagement, how are we talking about it in the field? And so having both of those perspectives kind of come together. And then from there, thinking about what training. So what was really handy was that I had just been at IRDL. I had these great textbooks about qualitative research. So I just brought them from my apartment to the library and said, hey, Ally, read these ones that I had just read. And so we had some really good training materials to kind of get us going. And then even after that, first, probably 2 or 3 months that we were onboarding, we still kind of check back in to say, what training do we still need? What do we still need to do to kind of make this happen? So it's been ongoing, but definitely more intense in the first couple of months. Yes. And so as soon as Ally started, we really, and by we, I mean I really relied on her perspective to kind of get stuff going, because we were we have a stratified random sample that we're using to recruit these students, so that we're not just finding the really uber engaged students, we're finding a nice mix, which, as Ally mentioned, means that we get students that are transfers to Penn State, change of campus, are international, are from a whole bunch of different backgrounds, which is really great. So one thing was, okay, we've got this giant list of student names. How are we going to recruit them efficiently or in a way that would make students say, yeah, I want to participate in this project?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I let Hailley know about is just that students get so many emails. I was like, Hailley, not gonna lie, I get so many students per week, whether it's from professors, which you tend to read those, obviously, or just random newsletters from the department, or from the university, things about concerts coming into town, so many emails. So a lot of times you're just kind of clicking through, and if it doesn't look super important or relevant to a class, you probably just delete it. So I started thinking about, okay, I'm a student, what would get me to answer an email? So one of the more simple things I suggested was just bolding the fact that you get a $20 gift card, because I didn't want that to get lost, because it's Amazon, you can use that for textbooks, it's useful. So I suggested that we bold that. And then something else I suggested later on was that we just start sending out more emails than we actually needed. So when we first started, I don't think either of us realized how hard it was going to be to get people to respond. So if we were trying to get 6 people that week, we would send out 6 emails. But then I started thinking well, what if we doubled that? So for the 2 communications people that we needed, why don't we email 4 people and double that? yeah, the way I sort of thought of it was there are going to be students that just really want to do this because they care about research and student engagement. But if they're far down on the list, it's going to take us a while to get to those people. So we might as well speed up the process and just get to those people sooner. So I think just some other insight I added was the beginning of the semester is a lot lighter in terms of coursework. And I think we've definitely seen that at the beginning of this semester. We had a bunch of people in the first couple weeks and you're like, yes, no one has anything going on. Whereas last semester, starting in the middle of October was kind of tough because that's when things really start to pick up for people. So we're 17 interviews down. So, and that's definitely been speeding up, which has been good.
Yeah. So it's been helpful to have Ally to provide some insight. And then the same has gone for interviews as well. So we practiced the protocol. Ally made her map. Ally did some practice interviews with students. And that was really helpful in just making sure that our questions were going to get us the type of information that we really wanted. But then what started coming also through in some of these practice interviews, and then in some stuff that we'll see in a couple of slides, just having some common experiences that Ally has with the students.
Yeah, I was really surprised by how many students came in where we had been involved in the same club, or I knew of a class they had taken, things like that. Just being such a big university, I didn't expect to have as many like things in common with people as I did. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and I think it helped Ally ask some good probing questions too to get more information from the student in a way that I probably would not be able to do just because, again, I don't have that experience of being an actual student at Penn State. So that leads us really nicely into some examples, other students that we've interviewed where we can really see Ally's perspective kind of play a big role.
So this is Daniela. She was the second person that we interviewed right after Olivia. She is a junior in the College of Communications. So Daniela and I connected on a couple different things. So first, her pink stickers represent peer mentoring, and her experience was being a TA in a biology class. So at first glance, it seems a little strange because, oh, this person's a communications major. Why are they TAing biology? Why are they taking that in the first place? However, I happen to be familiar with this particular course. I haven't taken it, but I've heard about it from a bunch of friends. And although the course is listed under biology, they really emphasize reflection. They journal throughout the entire semester. So to me, it seemed to make a lot of sense why a communications major would be drawn to that course. So I think that was useful because I wasn't like, oh, that's so weird that you're in that. The other thing we connected on was Penn State alternative breaks. That is the green that she has on her map, the volunteer experience. So alternative breaks is run through the student activities office, and they run service trips for students during winter, Thanksgiving, and spring break. Which was super cool that she did that because I was actually a site leader for an alternative break trip and had gone on one previously. So just knowing that Daniela was a part of that same service organization was really awesome. And as you'll see, we actually knew some of the same people. So it turns out that the trip that she did her freshman year, the site leader for that trip was on the executive board when I led my trip. So I think it was cool just that we knew the same person because it just sort of makes you more comfortable, I guess. I mean, it's nice when you meet someone and you find out you have somebody in common, especially at a school as large as Penn State. So this was pretty exciting and I think helped the interview run smoothly.
Yeah, and I think especially because it was our second one, for me, Ally and I were both in this interview, and as we were in it, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, wow, like there is content that Ally is getting from the student that I would never be able to get. And so it was a really powerful moment for me to be like, the way in which we're collecting this information, the way in which this research project is running this year is really special and is going to give us insight that I just can't get being in my, positionality within the university. So I was really, really happy that Ally was there. And yeah, I think it definitely made everyone in the room feel really comfortable of like, oh yeah, we know these common people, we have these common experiences. And Daniela told us a lot of really great stuff about her student engagement journey.
So this is Rachel's map. She is a senior in the College of Liberal Arts. This was a more recent interview. This was only like 2 weeks ago. So Rachel and I connected on a couple of different things. So I was in the College of Liberal Arts as well. So that's just an immediate connection there. But her study abroad experience, that like magenta color sticker in year 2, that was a summer program in France. And I had done a summer program in Italy when I was an underclassman too. So that was definitely cool, just to talk about like going to a foreign country when you really didn't know the language that well, and just sort of talking about that and how we sort of gained confidence afterwards was a really neat connection. And then we also talked a lot about diversity and inclusion and HR management. Rachel's actually pursuing a master's degree in human resources after graduation, and being a labor and employment relations major, I had taken a lot of HR courses. So we were also able to connect on that, which was really, really cool. So this is a quote that Hailley picked out. Yeah, so I think when I read this, it's just funny because it almost seems like I'm talking to a friend or something. It just sort of shows like a peer-to-peer connection, which once again, I mean, Rachel was pretty talkative, but I think she went into more depth about things because she knew that I was enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, and I love Ally's line. She's your girl. That's awesome. Again, just that kind of.
I say awesome a lot. I've realized by these slides. I'm like, oof, I gotta pick a different word.
It's all, we're learning. It's
yes. So then this is Reagan. She is a senior in the College of Health and Human Development. So Reagan and I bonded over the pink stickers. Those represent peer mentoring. So as I mentioned earlier, I was a new student orientation leader, and Reagan was a new student orientation leader as well. So I think that was really special for this interview for two different reasons. First, just because of how like weird of a job it is. Like you have really weird hours. There are shifts from noon to midnight, and that doesn't really exist at like your typical summer internship. So we were definitely able to bond about how it was so fun but so exhausting all at the same time. And then also Reagan began her Penn State experience at a different campus. So it was also really interesting for us to compare my experience as an orientation leader at University Park with her experience being an OL at a different campus. So this quote is really interesting. We started out talking about the Lions Pantry, which is a food cupboard here on campus for students. That's something that Reagan has spent a lot of her time being a part of. So we were talking about how she really wants to advertise that more because not a lot of students know about it. And I made the comment, oh yeah, I agree with you. I heard about it when I was an orientation leader, but I don't think I knew about it before. So we want to get the word out more. And then I was totally ready to like move on to the next sticker, but she was like, oh, wait a minute. Like I was an orientation leader too. I should put that down there. I was like, oh, good thing I mentioned that, or we totally would have been missing that from the map.
Yeah. So those common experiences play a big role. All right. So as Ally mentioned, we've got 17 out of 24 interviews done. So we are very close to the end. We can feel it. We can see it. We're just trying to get those last couple of students. In the 17 that we've done so far, we've really seen professional development as a big driver in our students' motivations to pursue an experience, which was not surprising to us, but was interesting to see how different students talked about that, whether they explicitly said, I wanted to gain professionalism or professional development skills or put it on my resume, or if they talked about it in a different way that you could kind of tie back to professional development. We also found out that curriculum can heavily influence engagement choices. And so there were a couple of students, Olivia's a good example, where some of those professional stickers that you saw on her map were actually ones that she had to do in order to graduate. And so I think sometimes in student engagement literature, we kind of say, yeah, students are going to pick all these things out because they want to do it. There's that like intrinsic factor. But we found that especially in some colleges, that intrinsic factor is more tied to, I need this to be able to graduate. And so then how can that help us as educators think about, are there better ways that we can structure those experiences so that even though it's tied with the curriculum, they can still be meaningful, they can still be interesting, and maybe the student doesn't feel like, ugh, I have to do this thing in order to graduate. So those were a couple ones that we saw right off the bat.
Right. It's funny too, because we have a question on our interview guide that we always ask about the most challenging experience, which is what motivated you to stick this out and make it through. And so many students are like, well, I had to, I needed to graduate. So that was the motivation. So yeah, that's been interesting to see. We've also found that parents, friends, professors, and advisors have heavily influenced student engagement choices. So a lot of people have said, oh yeah, my mom told me to join this, so I did, or my roommate said I should. And professors and advisors have also provided big influence. So we expected that, but it was definitely cool to see that all play out. And then we also saw that half of our interviews so far have joined an organizational experience in their first year. And most of the time that represents a club. And we also ask at the beginning of every interview, were you given any advice about student engagement or getting involved outside the classroom? And so many people say, oh, I've always been told you should join a club. So it seems like, at least at Penn State, clubs are sort of what is advertised most heavily to first year students.
Yeah, and we're also kind of curious at some of the maps where the student says, yeah, the advice was to join a club, and then sometimes they don't join a club at all.
Yeah.
So we're also kind of curious at that dynamic of this is like what they're being told, but then how does that actually play out and what they decide to do? Because this is a library-related research project, we do have a couple of questions around library resources, and then also thinking about how are students information creators and producers of the different things that they're doing. Do they do any research before they embark on some of these experiences? And we do have a question at the very end of the interview where we say, where do you think the library could maybe play a role or fit now that you're reflecting back on it? We are seeing some disconnect between library resources and connections to student engagement experiences, which has been really interesting for Ally and I to kind of talk through. Again, between, you know, like what does it mean for a student to incorporate library resources, and how could that play out for us, which has been cool to explore that possibility, and think a little bit more critically about like how can we kind of more meaningfully integrate ourselves into some of these buckets, where we could see maybe a big impact. But there have been some really great moments of library joy, which has been really fun. So one of the students talked about getting a music score from interlibrary loan, and being really excited about it, and some other ones as well. So it's been really cool to see kind of that spectrum. I think for me that's really helpful to inform my work as a student engagement coordinator, and trying to make those connections more clear between experiences in the library. So our next steps is that Ally and I are, as we said, very close to finishing the interviews. We're getting there. We also just started to code the interviews as well. So we have transcripts of the interviews. We're working on getting the maps all ready to go. We've got a code book. We're digging in. We're ready. And then part of it is also just sharing results, both of our collaboration and then the results of the work that we're doing. So we're getting there. Yes. So we did want to spend just a minute talking about what we've gained by collaborating with one another, because we've been having a lot of fun and also doing a lot of really cool things. So for me, it's just really nice to have a collaborator who's equally invested and excited in this project. I always get really happy when Ally comes into work and I'm like, oh my gosh, you'll never guess what happened. Like this person responded, or I just did this interview and it went really well. And so it's really nice to have someone who is just as into the project as I am, which has been really fun. I think also because of getting this student perspective and having Ally be such a co-collaborator in this process, and I really want to stress the idea of co-collaborator, it makes me really hopeful for changes, because I feel like we can make changes that will be meaningful and sustainable in a way that if I was just doing this by myself, I might not have that insider perspective. And so it also is really exciting just to feel like, yes, we can make change happen. And I've also really appreciated the opportunity to mentor Ally and to see that other side of the undergraduate research experience. It's kind of opened my eyes to how that process works. And I think that's helped inform the other work that I do around undergraduate research, which I'm really grateful to have that chance to think about in a different way.
I've definitely gained a lot from this experience too. So I would say one of the biggest things has been an increased knowledge of library resources. So I was definitely one of those students who originally, when I came to Penn State, I just thought of the library as a place and not necessarily a resource in terms of research. But even though I've graduated, I'm still excited that I've gotten that knowledge, because I'm planning to go to law school in the fall. And Hailley and I have talked a lot about how law libraries are very important, and it's part of what makes certain law schools so prestigious, is because their library is so strong. So I'm definitely hoping to take advantage of that during my first year at law school and beyond. Kind of scary, but I'm excited. I also gained just so much from having this experience be so hands-on. Like I said, I did have research projects before this, but it's not always common for undergraduates to have a decision-making role within research. My psychology lab also just has so many undergraduate research assistants that it's hard for us to get that one-on-one time with the people that are making those decisions, and having that input doesn't always happen, so I think it's been really valuable that I've gotten to help Hailley really make some big decisions as this has gone on. And I'm really grateful for that too. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And publication opportunities are also really huge. Not everybody gets that as an undergraduate or a recent graduate. So I'm also very excited for that possibility moving forward. And then this has also just been a great mentorship opportunity. I've been able to go to Hailley to ask about just broader career things, not just this project. So that's been really useful as well.
Yeah, so we're having a good time.
Yes.
And we're working well together, which is great. And so Ally and I have also talked about this as a really cool opportunity for libraries to think about bringing in undergraduate students to research that we do, and also being okay with the idea that the student doesn't have to be interested in librarianship because those research skills do transfer. So Ally's learned a lot from the library in the process, and I think it's been really great to have her disciplinary background embedded within this project as well.
Yeah, I definitely think my two majors fit with this project well. So psychology, definitely, like I mentioned, I gained a lot of research skills from that initial psychology lab that I think transferred well to this. So doing literature reviews and using Qualtrics, those are things that we're still doing. So I think it was awesome that I had that background before coming in. With my labor and employment relations major, I think this project has almost informed the education I got from that major. So I was taking a work-life balance class my last semester, and Hailley was telling me how like her first job at Penn State was some like wonky hours. And I was like, oh man, that'd be so cool to look into work-life balance of librarians. I think that would be a really interesting research concept. So I think my majors fit in pretty well, and I'm definitely happy that I was able to be a part of this. And then also, if someone were to, I was a senior when I started this project, so I already had law school as sort of my final destination. I had started applying, took the LSAT and all that. However, if someone were to hire a younger student, this might be their introduction to librarianship. So even if they hadn't known about that as a career or didn't seem interested in that right away, you might be able to sway them or introduce them to the field, which would be really cool.
Yeah. And so we want to finish our kind of talking part before we open it up for questions and answers, thinking about some practical takeaways. So if you're listening to this and saying like, yes, my next research project, I want to have an undergrad, Ally and I have come up with some things that are good to think about and things that we've benefited from. So the first one is obviously thinking about ways that the student can get some sort of recognition for doing this work. So one way is to think about funding. So I was really fortunate to have funds within the Student Engagement Network, but also thinking about within your libraries, there are student employment opportunities where the student could do undergraduate research in that way, or other external funding opportunities to apply for a research project to be able to pay the student for their time. Ally's working 10 hours a week, which is a really great chunk of time to be able to work on this project, and that has worked really well in that sense.
Yeah, and having research opportunities for credit is also really helpful to students. Like Hailley mentioned, I was paid for this opportunity, but for my first research position in the psychology lab, I took that for credit every semester. So that was also helpful because it was the equivalent to a class, but without the homework. So it was really nice, and I learned a lot, and I'm really grateful that I was able to receive credit for that.
Mm-hmm. So lots of different ways to think about that. Related to that too is thinking about that spectrum of involvement. So for us, it was really important to set goals really early on because that really influenced how Ally was going to be involved with this particular project. So because she was a senior when I hired her, because she was really interested in qualitative research, she ended up kind of on one far end of the spectrum of being really heavily involved as a collaborator on the project. But if you had a student that was an underclassman who was just getting started with research, you could kind of put them maybe on the other end of the spectrum where they're doing some stuff, but maybe not all the things. And so there's kind of, what I like about this is that there are probably lots of different ways to get the student involved in a way that's meaningful for them. But a lot of it is just thinking about setting those goals with the student really early on to be able to figure that out. And for me, that was also really helpful to think about onboarding and training so that when I was doing other stuff to get ready for this research project, I knew what to give Ally to get her ready so that she could do the work that she's doing right now.
Definitely. I think another big thing to consider is schedule flexibility. So I am so grateful that Hailley was very flexible in terms of when I came in for those 10 hours. So last semester, since it was my final semester and I was still taking classes, I had very weird windows of time. Some days I was like, oh, like I can come in, but I have to leave by like 3:50 or else I'm not going to make it to class on the other side of campus. So last semester I had sort of smaller shifts. So sometimes like an hour, hour and a half, but I was coming in every day. And now that I've graduated and I'm working in the area, we've been able to block off larger chunks of time. So now I come in 2 days a week for 5 hours, and that's how I hit the 10 hours. So I think being willing to be flexible in terms of when hours are happening definitely makes opportunities very attractive to students.
Yeah, and schedule flexibility both on my end, but also on Ally's end, since my calendar can also be a little wonky. And I think part of that then relates to the last bullet point, which is thinking about project management tools. So when Ally first started, we looked at like a handful of productivity sort of apps to try to figure out like how can we best communicate if I'm in a meeting and Ally needs to come in, for her time. So we settled on Trello, and that seems to be working pretty well. And so I can add tasks throughout the week about, oh, Ally needs you to do this or do that, or think about this, write a blog post. And then I don't necessarily have to be there when Ally starts. She can just go to the board, know what to do, which has been really handy. We've also used things like Box and Google Drive to store documents, all our good IRB stuff. And that has been good to keep it all organized and in one spot, or I guess two spots, two different locations. And then the last thing that's been really great is being able to text each other. So a lot of times Ally and I start off both emailed on the correspondence with the student as we're arranging an interview time. And then over time, the student sometimes drops off Ally and just responds to me. So sometimes I'll get an email like right before an interview is supposed to start that says like, hey there, Hailley, I'm wearing a yellow sweater and I'm at the entrance that you told me to meet you at.
But Hailley's not even there. I'm there.
Exactly. So I send Ally a text and I'm like, look for a yellow sweater. That's the student.
And then I find them.
So that's been really good to have that sort of communication style so that we can find the students that we need to do the interviews with, which has been super handy. So yeah. And I think that's what we've got.
Yeah.
So,
thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you. We've got my email. You can always send me an email, our website, our slides for today. And yeah, we'd love to open it up for questions to see what people are thinking, thoughts, other questions about the research, about our experience. We're ready.
All right, thank you, Hailley and Ally. We had a couple questions while you were presenting that I wanted to go back to. The first one was, how long, again, were your interviews? How long did they last?
Yeah, so our interviews have lasted anywhere from like 40 minutes all the way to 60, 70 minutes. So the student makes the map, and then essentially we go through each sticker and kind of talk about it. But depending on how much the student wants to talk or how many stickers that they put on really impacts the length of the interview.
Yeah, we have a matrix interview guide. So we're asking pretty much the same questions every time with a little bit of variation. But yeah, some students are just very talkative and want to stay the full hour.
Okay. There's also a question regarding slide 27, if you mind going back there.
Yes, let me, 27, maybe this is easier. Okay, yes. So what ended up happening with this one is that Reagan had put all her stickers down. Ally was going through asking questions, and Reagan realized that she had forgotten a sticker, that she had been a new student orientation leader.
Yeah, so when I mentioned that I was an orientation leader, that sort of jogged her memory of, oh wait, I did that too. I should put this down on the map. So I'm glad I mentioned that I was an orientation leader, or else that wouldn't have been a conversation that we were able to have.
Yeah, and we found that with a couple of students, we've been having conversations after they did the map and they realized like, oh man, got to add a sticker, or they want to change a sticker. That's also been really interesting. They like reclassify it partway through the interview. So we've learned a lot from that process. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, if anyone else has questions, feel free to add them to the chat box. But I do want to make sure to thank Hailley and Ally for presenting with us. I do want to also say, in case anyone joined us late, if you had multiple people in the room, if you could put that in the chat box, that helps us figure out how many people were actually attending today. And Erin has also put a link to the evaluation form in the chat box. If you could take a couple minutes or a couple of moments to fill that out, we'd appreciate that, because that helps us knowing about your thoughts about today's presentation and about our programming in general. And while we're waiting for questions, as a reminder, the recording of this presentation will be available to PALA members through the PALA website, and you should get an email with the recording. All right, we have another question. Can you explain again about compensation for the students?
Yes, we can. So the project is through IRB, and so what we proposed was that a student that completes the interview with us will get a $20 gift card. So we fill out all that paperwork on the front end, and then they do the interview with us. And so we were able to get, again, money through the Student Engagement Network to have that incentive.
Great. Erin, do you mind putting your email address in the chat box? Erin leads our Connect and Communicate series planning committee, so I asked her to put her email in the chat box in case anyone is interested in presenting or has any suggestions for future discussions, or is not a Pennsylvania Library Association member and is interested in being one. Erin's a great contact for all of that. Okay, another question. Have you spoken with any students who have changed their major during their time at Penn State?
Yes. The one that comes to mind right away is Olivia, just because we were just talking about her. So even though she wasn't at Penn State all 4 years, she did change her major coming from her other university to Penn State. So originally she was a business major, and she was talking about how like her first couple professional experiences were all about accounting. And then right before she came here, I think she was doing some research on the kinesiology major that's offered here. And so now her professional experiences have been like observation hours that are required by the College of Health and Human Development. So that experience has been something that's required for her. So I think that's a good example of how her major has really directed her engagement opportunities and what she's been up to, because like while she was a business major, they were very business oriented. And then when she was a kinesiology major, that was sort of the focus.
Yeah, and we also had a student, Harris, who did undergraduate research, and that student started out undeclared. And what's actually really interesting about their map is that the first 2 years have no stickers on it at all. And it wasn't until this particular student found undergraduate research within a college that they ended up declaring what their major was, which is really interesting. We also just did an interview recently where a student was a double major in political science and English. They added English in their junior year. And what was really fascinating about this map was that the student almost didn't speak about political science as a major at all. A lot of their engagement choices ended up being driven by this English major, especially in the later half, once that they had decided that English was going to be the second major. And political science was really only mentioned. The students studied abroad and took classes about political science in Korea where they were studying. So that was also really fascinating to me, that this major that had driven them throughout the first 2 years of their time at Penn State really wasn't involved in their engagement experiences. That's a good question, Grace.
Another question, can you talk a little bit more about how you both decided on your conceptual frameworks?
The conceptual frameworks for the project itself?
For the project.
Yeah. So I've been doing a lot of research and work around student engagement within higher education. And one particular article that's been really interesting to me is one by a woman named Ella Cow, who's coming out of New Zealand. And she's got what Ally and I lovingly refer to as the cloud, but it's essentially a way to think about student engagement opportunities where the student is at the center. The student is influenced by the university structures and systems, by the student's own background. The student participating in the experience has, in the first round of the cloud, Ella calls them proximal and distal consequences, and not consequences in a negative connotation, just like the impacts of that experience. And then the reason we call it the cloud is that there's a sociocultural influence. So everything that's happening in the world around that particular student influences how they make those decisions about experiences. So that framework has been really helpful to think about kind of those different things that are going on as the student is making those decisions, and did drive some of the questions that we ask in the interview. I would also say that the network played a pretty big role in thinking about how we were going to ask certain types of questions. So as I've been sitting in on the Student Engagement Network meetings in my role as the Student Engagement Coordinator, they have these like growth areas that Penn State talks about. So there's professional development, multicultural awareness, systems thinking, civic responsibility, and ethical reasoning. Ooh, I got them all. And so we were curious about like how those things played out. We didn't ask direct questions about that, but we're going to code for those themes to see if those are coming through in student engagement experiences. And I think the big thing were two of our research questions talk about discovery and motivation. So that also really drove how we wanted to kind of start each experience off when we were talking with the student. And we were also curious at linkages between the experiences. So how are these experiences linked either to their major, to other ones, to people? And so I think all of those things kind of built how we put this project together.
Great, thanks. Just hanging out, seeing if anyone else has any other questions. But again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and Hailley and Ally for presenting with us.
Yeah, it's been great to be here.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything else. I'm thinking maybe, Erin, we can stop the recording and let everyone